Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of the Bitstocks podcast. Today's a little bit of a special one. We have David Case here. We're going to be talking a little bit more about gaming, a little bit more about gaming on top of the blockchain. Yeah, this is one that me and David are really looking forward to. I'm Elia Yousif. I head up our OTC desk, and I'm our resident gaming enthusiast, as well as a few people here. I'll let everyone introduce themselves.
David Case, thanks for coming.
Thank you. So I'm David Case. I'm the chief architect for Kronoverse, and we are building CryptoFights, which is a player versus player real turn-based fighting game that's going to be running on the Bitcoin SV blockchain.
Sounds good. Can you let us know a little bit more about your background to start with? I know not a lot of people know about the company or yourself, so it will be good for our viewers and listeners to know a little bit more about your background.
Yeah, I have been designing and building computer software for like 20 years, a long time in enterprise consulting. I worked as a Microsoft consultant doing SharePoint stuff and real boring things. And then I started a business-to-business e-commerce company in 2010, which I did that till 2017. About 2013, a friend of mine reimbursed me for lunch in Bitcoin.
First experience.
Yeah, that was my friend. And I totally forgot about it until 2017 when it started hitting the news. And I'm like, oh, I think I have some in a backup somewhere. So I found it, and it was like $30 at the time. And then it turned up being worth like $250 or $300. I'm like, hey, that's something cool. And then that was right at the peak where everything was just skyrocketing. And so I found some Bitcoin Cash from there, and turned out there's a little bit of money there. And that kind of got me intrigued in it. And then I started following the space. And then for most all of 2018, very just kind of all coins, just very interested in the crypto space in general. And then during the hard fork of Bitcoin in fall of 2018, I really kind of started understanding Bitcoin as a development platform. And then I've been very, very Bitcoin focused since then. And then as a company, I guess we came together. I responded to a post on a Ethereum dev Reddit channel in like late 2017 that Adam, my business partner, posted, and we just kind of met that way. He was looking to do some gaming in the blockchain space, and we didn't have a real grand vision at the time of what we wanted to do, and it's just been kind of growing and growing over the last year and a half, and we've gotten far more ambitious and far more focused in what we're doing. And yeah, so
you have been running the company with your partners for how long already?
A year and a half. It was like I started working in February of 2018, and he had already started with our main Unity developer, who's in Portugal, Abel. They started the company. I mean, it wasn't a company yet at that point. It was just kind of a project. And then, I worked with them for about a year and a half starting R&D, figuring out what we wanted to do. And then in the last year, been really, really focused on building CryptoFights.
So given the industry that you're in right now, how do you complement from your company for your background? Do you have like just back-end development skills, or because I've seen that you are only 3 people in the company, and I'm guessing lots of...
Yeah, we have lots of contractors and we outsource a lot of work. But yeah, so my focus is really the blockchain and kind of the back-end infrastructure sort of side of things. So that's my focus. And then Abel kind of leads up the Unity development, the game development side of things. And then Adam takes care of all the business stuff and outsourcing and managing everything. And pretty much he does everything.
I see. Most of our viewers, if they don't know how gaming works in general, and people who are designing games, it's a very lengthy process.
Yeah.
If we take the example of Half-Life series, people know that it takes years and years.
Just for rumors.
Is the third one out yet?
We're still waiting.
That's true. So I would like to talk a little bit about the development process when it comes to gaming development. I know that standard gaming development, maybe it's more structured, but I'm guessing the blockchain as a backend for development is a little bit chaotic.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit, first of all, how comes you guys chosen blockchain to be the backend solution for the gaming? And we'll try to talk about the advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah, and that's been a process that is very much, it has changed and matured over the course of our last year and a half. We started very much with an idea of kind of a simple Ethereum game where you make one contract call from both players, and that just kind of like it kind of sets up an initial situation, and then it just basically based on some random number that gets integrated based on a handshake between two players. It would then come out with an output. So it would be a very simple, almost like a lot of the dice games you see in the
proof
blockchain
of concept
world.
you started. Yeah.
But we've matured to the point now where kind of the game development process itself and blockchain is, we're really looking to have a competitive game where we've got full auditability of everything that's done. And so we're going to be supporting some ability for players to win money actually by putting money into tournaments and then paying that out. And so we need to be very, very sure that everything can be compliant with regulations and that everything can be auditable and fully transparent, so that we're not a roadblock or someone who could affect the outcome of the game. And so that's one reason where blockchain is very, very important and development on blockchain. And then the other thing is, so CryptoFights is a fighting game, and you have got a fighter who is a token, and that is your player that you own. And then you also have different weapons and armor, which are also tokens. So we're relying on a lot of blockchain technology to allow you to really own your own in-game assets. And then those can be traded, those can be won. You can level up your character based on different strengths and weaknesses. Or as you level up, you specify different like strengths and weaknesses, and then what weapons you have and what armor you have. They work well with how different characters are customized.
So what will be stored specifically on a blockchain from, let's say, when your character is evolved, you acquire items? What part of will be stored exactly on the blockchain? Is it every single?
It is ideally every single thing. Now, in the early stages, we're not yet trying to put all the game assets, the 3D models, the textures. Ideally, we'd like those all to get on the blockchain too. It's just we haven't gotten to the point of actually optimizing those for storage and perfecting that process. But as far as the gameplay goes itself, every action that the player takes is actually a teeny tiny blockchain transaction. And Bitcoin SV transactions are cheap enough that we can actually afford to do that and have gaming be relatively affordable, or very affordable even. It's a fraction of a penny for every move. So you can get significant amount of length battle and it still is pennies to play. So
is there anything that you would require a blockchain to do that you don't have right now in order to allow you guys to maybe create a more dynamic game?
Up until Bitcoin SV came around, yes, I can say that. Oh, well, and that's not totally true. Even Bitcoin Cash would have provided us to do a lot of what we needed to do. I was ignorant of Bitcoin as a development platform until the Bitcoin SV, Bitcoin Cash split. And SV, just having a roadmap that's not going to change or that's committed to not changing the protocol is just a huge win from a development standpoint. But also really getting the understanding of Bitcoin as a development process really opened up a lot of doors, because Ethereum and EOS and all those, it's very much about everything requires a miner to have seen a transaction, to have validated a transaction and put it into the blockchain before it really is valid for anyone to count on. And in the Bitcoin space, there's just so much more you can do, because a transaction can be completely signed and valid, but not yet committed. And you can do some real creative things with setting up situations where certain UTXOs have not yet been broadcast, but they're private to us as the game developer. And people can spend off of those, and we can do different payment channel things. We can do all sorts of ways that we can give really high performance gaming, like mainstream level gaming performance within a blockchain that gives us the immutability, and we can then choose to broadcast things as long as people have played along with the rules. But if they decide that they want to run away with the funds, well, we never broadcast those transactions, so those funds don't exist in the first place. And there's some really neat things that we can do as kind of a game server on the blockchain. But now before Bitcoin SV, the closest thing you could really get would be some sidechain you run using Ethereum technology. And that's just, Loom is out there. We played around with Loom for a while, and it worked okay, but it's still, it's just not a very performant system. Yeah. And plus then you've got all the kind of consensus stuff you still need to come up with of, okay, people still either need to trust that either we need to find a distributed way to do a proof of stake system where there's multiple validators, or it's just entirely we're running a blockchain, in which case, why does it need to be a blockchain? So
you mentioned as an advantage like the auditing and trail the blockchain provides out of the box. What would you say some other advantages over normal gaming platforms that you can use blockchain for?
The ability to own your own items and to trade your own items and to have even a marketplace for items. I mean, if you look at old school RPG games where you're walking around and you go into a town and there's the weapons shop where you can upgrade your weapons. Well, that's an actual shop that someone could stand up in a virtual world and they can buy and sell weapons and goods. And I mean, it really brings commerce to the digital world in an entire new way than it's ever been possible before. I mean, I guess you could do that in a non-blockchain world, but then basically someone is just buying into your ecosystem and they're investing in your items, which are yours that you could, I don't know. It's not a very sustainable world to live in. Where this really allows that to be kind of completely decentralized, and that if people want to make the investment that certain things are going to be worth more in the future, or they know that a certain sword is in limited supply and they come across one for cheap and they can turn around and sell it. It enables real world commerce in a virtual space. And I think that's really, really awesome.
So I guess one of the items which will be highly beneficial for collectors will be the uniqueness and the authenticity of the items that they are acquiring over time, because obviously it's very difficult to forge the items in game on the blockchain.
Would you be able to, going on that point, actually count how many items exist and who owns those items?
We can know what Bitcoin addresses own the items. We can't necessarily know who those are. I mean, it's the same thing as any other Bitcoin transaction, that if that wallet is tied to something that has been in a persona and a public, if it's somehow publicly known, then it could be tracked back. But even when you enter a battle in CryptoFights and you kind of commit your items, you're not necessarily committing a bunch of items that we verify that you own. Whoever owns the items or owns the fighter basically says that it's valid for this battle. And so we could set up systems where people can rent items, or you can borrow items from other people, or there isn't anything that ties that, okay, because you entered this battle with this sword and this armor, you own those all. That isn't necessarily the case. So there's still some privacy with that, or if you want to. I mean, obviously, if it turns out that a certain sword there's 4 of and they sell for a whole lot of money, it doesn't necessarily identify who you are, so that someone could, I don't know, take it from you. But as far as the circulating supply, which is the other question you asked, so when we mint different items, there's some of them will be very, very common, and there'll be thousands of those, and other ones there will be 4 of. And there might be other things that have very similar properties to that, but it could have its own skins, or it could be just a completely unique one-off item. And so there will be certain collectibles, definitely, that are different from the main run of the common items. We're looking kind of like at a Magic the Gathering type rareness system, where the common, rare, or common, uncommon, rare, epic, and legendary, or something like that. We're kind of working a lot still on the exact distribution and what the specific items are, but it's well in process.
Okay. And seeing the popularity of battle royales recently, what do you guys think about that? Do you think that's something that can be put on the blockchain?
So right now, the things that work really well on the blockchain are things that are either turn-based or time-based. So in our system, we've actually got a bot that interacts with players. It's called the Chronicler, is what we've named it. And that works really, really well when we actually can transfer control over to someone, and then they will take their turn, or to multiple players, and they have up to a certain point to respond to us. And then we can kind of collate the answers or respond to what happens based on the outcome of their action. Those games work really, really well. You can, with the same concept of the time-based, you can shrink those time periods down considerably such that you've got different time windows where players can take actions. And so you get closer and closer to real time. There are some different approaches to actually doing full real time gaming. But there are still complexities in that ideally you want, when someone's taking a turn, you want them to be signing the state of the battle as it is so that they're stating what they're reacting to. And so as we get to the point where multiple players are moving at the same time, you have to come up with either approaches where there allows interpretation of what other different players have done, so players trust us more. There's various approaches, and we've got a number of models and prototypes on kind of more real-time gaming. But right now, what we're looking at mostly is turn-based and time-based games, because that's easier to get to market and to get at that out first. But we're definitely looking at bringing kind of all gaming types.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah.
He's a big player of that. So if we were to list some of the disadvantages in this case that we have currently with the blockchain technologies, one of the main disadvantage for me will be the stable grounds that the blockchain provide, because as you said, you most likely tried different blockchain technologies and you had to jump from one to another because certain things have been changing, or you weren't able to do an MVP on that given blockchain given the limitations. Me personally, I find that a big disadvantage because I don't have a solid grounds to develop my application on top. So would you say you have finally found some sort of blockchains which is able to provide you that?
Yeah. We were on the cusp of having a kind of starting to open up beta on kind of our previous approach. And I just had a couple more things I needed to kind of finish up. And as Bitcoin SV coming to light and me understanding it more, I really, really tried to just push and say, okay, I just need to finish up this with the old technology so we can get to that point. And it answered so many of the outstanding problems I had that I couldn't anymore. Like I basically had to turn the page or kind of flip the switch and say, no, this is the right answer, because so many things when it comes to, just learning to rely on a commodity blockchain where it's open, you put a valid transaction out there, miners are competing to get that in there. Like it answers so many problems that we were trying to solve with any sort of a proof of stake or a proof of authority system. And the fact that we can the relying on the fact that the network is incentivized to make zero conf transactions work, and that it can just essentially put everything in a time order for us, and we don't have to worry about any of the consensus around that. That just it solved everything. And to the point where it's become an obsession of mine. It's just it's really powerful and really cool. And I don't think the world understands how far along we are. And there's hundreds of developers working on hundreds of different projects in that space. And the next couple of years are going to be really, really interesting because we're way farther along than people realize. And that it's hard not to get really excited about.
So this is another topic which is interesting because, we are in a very small bubble. Yeah. Not a lot of people know about blockchains, and you guys are building blockchain-backed gaming.
Yeah,
that's even smaller than what we are in this industry. How do you think you will find the customers? How would your project evolve? How would you gather those customers, and how would you make money basically going forward? What's the plan?
Yeah. Within the small bubble that is blockchain people, they're really, really excited to see what we come up with. And that's, that definitely is, that's a weird line we've been having to walk over the course of the last couple of years, is like, we really want to be blockchain first, but also we know that for financial success, getting good fiat on-ramps, or even having fiat tokens that we're using on the blockchain rather than using a crypto-based token, is definitely ways we've been looking at for exactly how we monetize the system. So we're working right now. We're working with a number of lawyers in the gaming space and really looking at how to make absolutely sure that we can be compliant with gaming laws in various places and that we can be classified as a skill-based game so that there's a lot less limitations on how people can interact with that. And we're really trying to look at it being that this can be a way that people can actually financially make a profit from playing if they're good at it. And so that's one aspect, one way of getting things onboarded that we're really looking at. And then the whole collectibles thing, that we've seen a lot of interest in that as well, that has kind of gotten people involved in the gaming space a little bit. And as far as general groups of the population go, gamers tend to be a lot more interested in crypto than any other kind of subset of the population. And we read a couple studies, I don't remember the exact numbers, but many tens of percents of gamers hold some crypto at this point in time. And that actually is very optimistic as well.
When you spoke about gamers and crypto, now you must imagine how big the eSports industry really is. I mean, there is tens of millions up for grabs in certain competitions. How do you see blockchain really infiltrating that industry? Because I'm guessing that's really where this is ultimately going. I mean, it's crypto, blockchain, entwined with what everyone is when gamers is nerds, because essentially that's all we are. Right. And now it gives us our own ecosystem. You know, we've already got the gaming and the esports industries where there's, you know, arenas being filled out of people going to watch these gamers actually play in these tournaments. I mean, I know you guys mentioned that you have the ability to place a game state on the blockchain and then go back and rewatch that. Yeah. So one aspect would be streaming. Right. When we look at Twitch and the hundreds of millions of viewers that Twitch have, is this something that you guys are looking to incorporate soon, or is it a little
absolutely.
bit more?
So that's actually part of, I mean, that's kind of right off the get-go, because every move that's made within CryptoFights is a Bitcoin transaction, and it's broadcast to the network right away. Essentially, you can, by watching the mempool, live stream a game. So just by simply pointing your viewer, it's really a custom block explorer, really. I mean, our game client is a block explorer, our game viewer. And so by pointing that at the right kind of initial transaction and then watching the transactions that come after that, you can actually replay a game as it happens. And then also historically the same way, you can just point at that same initial transaction and have it play through the historical transactions that happen on the blockchain in order to live stream. And what's really cool about that is it isn't just like Twitch is a video. So you don't really have the game. You have an image of what the game looked like. But as social communities start building on the blockchain, as there's so many different things, like the metanet on Bitcoin SV is really just all about transactions that can point to other transactions. And so you can have a situation where there's actually commentary going on that points to those transactions in the same immutable data set. And so as you replay whatever different subsets of data your viewer can handle, I mean, it can show, could have commentary of chat rooms or of actual voice commentary or whatever else anyone else decides to put on the blockchain that points to those same transactions. You can kind of play back in a real-time way. So there's all sorts of opportunities to build community out there around what's going on in real time. And then the other aspect, which I actually didn't touch on later when we were talking about the kind of gaming on the blockchain, but it's a huge thing. And we're really, really trying to build Kronoverse, which is our platform that CryptoFights runs on, in a super extensible and modern, for real friendly for modders, so that at a very, very small level, how a game is defined is by a whole bunch of very small actions, each of which can have their own licensing information set up. So that in order to use this certain action, you need to pay a teeny tiny fraction of a penny that gets paid to the game developer. But then that's out there open and anyone can integrate that one little action into their own game. And so when we put CryptoFights out there, which has a whole set of ecosystems of you can have, like, you enter battle, you choose 4 actions from your set of however many you own or have earned over time. And you put those out there, and it uses the CryptoFights fighters, and it uses all the CryptoFights weapons. Well, anyone else can go ahead and actually start modding that game. And for every bit of CryptoFights that they used, we're still going to get a teeny tiny ongoing fraction, but that licensing is built right into the items that live on the blockchain.
Yeah.
And so they can start modding that and building that. And so it could even be that you do a certain type of attack, and modders could build it such that it changes the game in any way. And so it could morph it into a whole new thing, or it could just be, hey, here's some new humiliations when you get a critical hit or whatever.
Do these need to be approved before by the developers?
No. Our game client is going to play our rules and our actions and all our stuff. And so a person can't necessarily just get for free a new game client, just add new things. So we can choose to, with our game client, support other actions that people put in, and that doesn't need any, for our client to use it, it needs approval. But if someone else wants to build a different front end up for it, they can use ours and use other people's, and there's no approval needed necessarily. So there's a number of different pieces where so we've got our game client is one piece that is ours. And then we also have our chronicler services, which are ways of doing auditable random number generation and some trusted timestamping and escrow services and things that can't be done just player to player on the blockchain. But the actual code for the game itself lives on chain in Bitcoin transactions. So people can take that stuff, the logic of how the game runs, and they can do whatever they want with it. And built into that, like I said, is all the licensing. And so there isn't, it's really, we're trying to make it so that everyone is incentivized to be open and to make things that are open. And really, we want to get to the Ready Player One level where
I was waiting for that.
No, that's
how far do you think we are away from that? Because when you think of Ready Player One, and you actually a virtual world where essentially there is no limitations of what you want to become or what you want to do.
Right.
That's like a modder's paradise.
Right.
You can create your avatar as whatever you want it to be.
Yeah.
And what they have in there, the examples of their collectibles, is they have collectibles that allow you to have special powers inside this world.
Yeah.
How far do you think we are away from that? Because when you look at that, that's Bitcoin right there.
Yeah, well, no, it is. And that's what's neat. So we're not that far away from it technologically. Where we are that far away from it is just getting protocols that people agree upon to support together. And we're trying to get a basis of a number of aspects of okay, here's the tokens and the items, and here's how state change actions are implemented, and how, there's a lot of little pieces we're starting to build out. But whether or not people decide to build games using our protocols or not that's completely up to them. And so getting a point where different developers have kind of come together to agree on protocols of how to build this. Now, certainly, Bitcoin SV has a lot of scaling to do before we're quite to the point that you could do anything like that. But at the same time, so much like how the game processing works in a state machine, which is how we're doing our games. Like the actual Bitcoin transactions themselves are teeny tiny. It's really just trying for each action that a player takes. It's them saying, I want to do this. And all the code and everything that runs, it's not like, everything, all the rules that get applied to that are already out on the blockchain. And so each transaction is teeny tiny. And so you can do a lot of stuff just by kind of setting the initial states, putting the initial code, the initial rules out there, and then letting it run through just little states. I want to attack this player, which takes 40 bytes of data to communicate that, plus the Bitcoin transaction overhead. It's really small. And the processing that needs to get done to achieve that is also very small. So we can get to a pretty grand scale right now because all the 3D rendering is not going to happen on the blockchain. That's going to happen in your client, and the rules of how to do that might be on the blockchain. But so I think it will blow people away what can be done 4 or 5 years from now. I think that the tech is mostly there to start having people collaborate on on a large scale multiverse world. It's just about people kind of getting the vision together of how to start using each other's pieces and extending upon those.
Yeah. Do you think hardware is going to have an impact with the blockchain?
I'm sure that the virtual reality and augmented reality stuff. I mean, I just saw that last week, the new Harry Potter game came out, which I haven't played it yet, but my roommate's all over it. And he was a huge Pokemon Go thing too. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be some really cool stuff like that of augmented reality in the real world, but that's actually tied to a mutable blockchain that's open and public. And I don't yet have a grand vision of how that's all going to work. But it's
Baby
exciting.
Yeah.
Another thing that I wanted to ask you, since you did mention that the gamers are like a strong community together, if we zoom out from the low level, protocol level and programming and everything, obviously you need people who will make the UI, the interfaces, things that people can see and start using it. How difficult is it to find people who know how blockchain works and start building those things? Is it quite a challenge?
Yes, I've had a job actually I should mention that right now. I've had a job post open for a couple months. Definitely need some developers.
You heard it here, guys.
The Bitcoin developer space, especially, just because of how the history of Bitcoin has been, most developers have not spent the effort to look into Bitcoin because from everything you've heard and seen and known over the last 10 years, that's not what it's for. That's not how it works. It's these for teeny tiny financial transactions that take forever to commit or to be secured. And I think really most people don't understand Bitcoin at all. And I know it took me a long time before I started actually getting it. So yeah, finding people is very hard, but I think that that's starting to change. I mean, I know that, again, in the Bitcoin SV space, like the development community people are very, very excited. And I know I was at CoinGeek conference last month, and the excitement in the room for the developer days, like there's no one's concern is about the financial side at all. It's about this really cool technology that's moving forward, and people are super excited about it and building really cool things. And I mean, just the whole infrastructure is just growing by leaps and bounds. Every month there's quantum leap in what kind of infrastructure is there for you to build upon. And there's been a number of times where Unwriter is this unknown developer out there who just keeps coming out with new stuff. And like, as I was learning, like I would hit some new roadblock that's like, okay, well, I need to start building some tooling to do X, Y, or Z. And like that week, the tools dropped and it's like, oh, cool. That's exactly what I need. I don't need to worry about that now. So, and that happens a lot. Like the whole support ecosystem is really growing, and we're using this token technology. It's not formally released yet, but it's from some guys in California. And it basically makes building tokens, although they're a lot more complex than what you think of just as a normal token. But essentially you can build them just by building normal JavaScript objects, and you don't actually need any new code at all. There's certain limitations that you need to understand about just because things exist on Bitcoin. There have to be transactions that actually get recorded. So there's some like security things that I have to own, essentially the UTXO that's tied to an item in order for me to call a function that updates that item. But at the same time, you get essentially an interface that is just building a simple object-oriented JavaScript object that you can then instantiate, and that creates a new token out there. And you can call a function on that, and that will actually transfer it to someone else, or it will update the state of it. And so there's some tools that are coming out that make it really, really easy to develop, such that Bitcoin experience isn't necessarily the roadblock anymore. I mean, you still need to find people, hopefully, who are really excited about Bitcoin and what we're able to build and where we're going. And that's something that is a very small subset of the general developer population at this time. But
yeah, I think I've noticed.
I was going to say, we've experienced the same thing. And David, you're probably firsthand. I mean, us trying to find, I think, good Bitcoin devs has been something we've struggled with.
Yeah, it is quite a challenge, as you put.
We're all facing it.
Well, and I think that's true with devs in general nowadays, though. I mean, I think it's just that it's a developer's world right now. And
but it's interesting because the funny part, whenever we introduce someone to the Bitcoin community or Bitcoin in general, I always give a fair warning saying, be careful, this will be consuming you.
Yeah.
And they don't take it seriously.
No.
But
until it grips them and pulls them under, and you just wake up one day and think,
wow. It's not just, as you said, a ledger where people are transacting value. It's more than that.
Yeah.
Definitely more than that. And the more you dig into the mechanics, what it achieves, how you can use it, and you just discover that you know less than you, you think you know. So that's quite the challenge to actually bring someone on board who has, I know Bitcoin.
Yeah.
That's quite the challenge. And from our experience in building the Gravity ecosystem, it is a challenge to go online and even find things that people don't even understand and mislead. So I think from developers' perspective, it is important to actually understand how we can use Bitcoin to solve certain things rather than just jump ahead and say like, this is what Bitcoin is going to do and it will solve all the problems, everything at once. But yeah, that's an interesting concept. Yeah.
How have you found regulators? I know you mentioned it a few times that you've made sure that your game is as compliant as can be.
Yeah.
How have the regulators been trying to get their head around a game that's on the blockchain?
You know, at this point, we're mostly dealing with lawyers more than regulators, just because we're not at a point yet where any regulators are actually seeing what we're doing. But that's an area that we're, I know from what I guess you guys would probably know far better than I do. And from what I've just seen of the financial industry, like there's just no one's really sure mostly what Bitcoin and blockchain in general even are, or how to categorize or how to conceive of it. And that's going to be really interesting over the next couple of years as kind of that, hopefully it starts getting some clarity so that so that people know how to move forward. But I think in the Bitcoin SV space, it does seem like that's something that is on everyone's radar, that, okay, this can't just be we'll figure this out later and hope they don't shut us down. This needs to be something that we need to be proactive and say, how do we build this such that this is, because in reality, these aren't, none of the problems that are being faced are new problems. People just don't know quite how to categorize what is going on under the covers. And so with gaming stuff, we certainly have things to look at, like, how do we structure things such that that we're not gambling, or that if we are, where it's within the regulations of where we're able. So we've come to a point right now where we're really looking at games of skill where people can pay an entrance fee on themselves and then through a tournament can get paid out prizes. And we're looking within US, I think there's like 44 or 40 US states that we have pretty good grip, and Canada as well. Pretty good grip of what the regulations are, and we think we know what it takes for us to fall in lines with what's required there. So, but yeah, it felt like looking at which jurisdictions we can roll out to and what we need to do for that. We need different lawyers for each one. And so
is this something you've experienced before, maybe a previous project, or is it the first time now with Bitcoin?
I've been in e-commerce. No, this is new stuff for me, certainly. But luckily, Adam, my partner, is pretty on top of that, and I don't have to dig too far into that stuff. So,
yeah, because we've been proactive with lawyers, with the regulators. Ever since we first opened our doors in 2014. So we feel your pain, because sometimes they say, no, you definitely can't do that, but they won't tell you what you can do. It's just, you just definitely can't do that, but we'll get back to you on the other stuff.
Well, and in being that we're in the gaming space, and Calvin Ayre is our first investor, he's certainly got some experience in that area, so that helps. That helps. He's pointed us to some lawyers to talk to and to get a good grip on what we can and can't do. So
you certainly have a point. The regulators are not there yet. They can't classify it, or I guess they don't want to kill it at early stages, so they're trying to see how it evolves.
And what's really interesting is looking like Apple and Google as kind of like they're not regulators, but certainly they're huge gatekeepers to what you can and can't do. And so even if we look at technologies where we have in-game tokens that are, really nothing any different than an in-game currency on any other platform, it just happens to run on a blockchain. So if it's like a gold that you get in the game that you would buy through the App Store, and it's not something you can trade outside the app, it's just something you can use to make purchases. Well, if Apple or Google start thinking that that's a cryptocurrency that people are buying, well, then they put up red flags. So it's like just the ignorance of the space in general definitely makes you have to be very careful about how you describe things or how you like I say, in a situation like that, if I've got an in-app currency that I buy and can spend on in-game items, I mean, 95% of the games on the app stores do that exact thing, but because it's on a blockchain, if we have to be careful how we,
yeah. I think we know that way too well. Just because something's done in a certain way, it's.
But I think it's getting there. We had quite fruitful conversations with the regulators and also the lawyers. They are understanding more and more the technology, so it helps to actually categorize.
I think the best thing is now that they realize that this isn't going anywhere. I think now it's given us some serious.
There are
demand.
more and
we
more
can now
guidelines.
demand some answers from the regulators. We've been around for a while, and we're sitting here. Look, hey, we love to be compliant, but you guys ain't helping. So I mean, I think now that Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies with the whole Facebook news coming out, everybody knows now that we are not going anywhere, and we need to be taken seriously. And we're not trying to do stuff outside of the law, but we just want to do stuff with a little bit more flexibility.
Yeah, and it's actually on that topic, it's pretty interesting because I know both France and the US governments have talked very much about kind of needing to have some regulation around what Facebook's doing. And that's going to be really interesting how much that might actually be a catalyst to get some answers for the rest of us, because people don't want Facebook to take over the world. So
they have a huge user base.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if Facebook took over, we could imagine what a world would look like.
No, thanks.
Yeah.
Most of the online platforms, people use Facebook products. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
They have such a reach. Incredible. I would like to ask you one last question in terms of your future plans as a company and where you guys want to be in the next year or two, and if you have any surprises that you guys are going to release.
I don't think I have any surprises, but basically, we are actively right now trying to get CryptoFights out the door. Out the door, I should say, open to beta testers and getting to the point where hopefully we're really trying to get an open beta out by the end of Q3. We'll see how that goes. And then as soon as possible to get the game out public so that we can really start working on kind of Kronoverse as a platform. So CryptoFights is built on the Kronoverse platform, which is what we're building. And that's where we get into kind of some of the modding stuff we talked about, some of the ownership of tokens, really trying to get to a point where we can provide services that enables other developers to build games in the same way that we have so that they can start interacting with each other. So that's really about a 18 to 24 month process before that's kind of out there. What we've got is all the tools that if I'm a developer that wants to do, at first, like I say, a turn-based or time-based game, which can be anything from board games to really interactive worlds that are in just a time-based or a turn-based,
action kind of.
Yeah. So there's lots and lots of different types of games that can be built on that. And we're trying to get the platform out there that it's really easy for people to integrate with, to use our services to do things like random number generation and timers and kind of the things that they need someone else to do. And that's all fully audited.
So
and
you're kind of working on the framework side of the tools to provide.
Right. So we've got a number of different things. Like CryptoFights is mostly, it's at the point where our game developers are working on that, and our back end is not yet fully generic for anyone to be able to plug into, but it's built and it works. And we can do battles on CryptoFights right now. So we're just kind of tweaking the different game mechanics and making sure that we've got good balance on everything, and that ultimately the game is fun and competitive and skill based in the ways it needs to be. So we're kind of fine-tuning the balance of that right now while I'm really working on kind of the platform and the next level steps. And that's where I need a developer to help me.
In that, if you don't mind me asking, what type of languages you use on the back end?
It's JavaScript.
JavaScript mainly?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's essentially, we're doing a lot of prototyping in Google Firebase. And probably even some of our early running is going to be in Google Firebase. But what we're doing can certainly be it's a Node Express app that does, it does have to communicate with Bitcoin Node, and we do have to, we have to make sure that we're when transactions come in, we're triggering the right actions in a timely fashion. And where mostly that's a lot of the services we're bringing is kind of that interface layer between the JavaScript and the Bitcoin nodes to make sure that things are fast and trustful, and that we've got a good sense that we know what percentage of the hash power has a transaction before we respond to it, so that it can't be double spent, and just a lot of that interface between JavaScript and Bitcoin. But the development stuff is, it's all JavaScript, which lives on chain, which is really cool too. And that can be, it's JavaScript right now, but we've been playing around with WebAssembly as well, so that we can get higher performance, which will be cool, and smaller data loads.
I think JavaScript has gained quite a lot of popularity in the last 3-4 years. Almost all the web developers and people who start actually writing backends as well, starting using JavaScript, compiled JavaScript.
Yeah. No, so we right now are actually using the client itself is written in Unity, which is C#, and we are using an old Bitcoin core library, and Bitcoin, I think it's called, to do kind of our Bitcoin stuff, Bitcoin wallet functionality on the client. But we're actually moving to a process where that's going to be running in JavaScript on the phone as well, and just communicating with Unity via some communication layer stuff. Because really the richest tools for Bitcoin right now, or at least for Bitcoin SV, are all in JavaScript. That's where you kind of get the most cutting edge stuff. Okay. And most of the other stuff is really, really legacy and clunky for C# anyways.
I see. Elia, do you have any other questions? Or David, if you have any other questions
do you
for
have
us?
anything for us? Want to ask us maybe?
No, I think it's been good.
Well, thank you for coming along, and it was really a good pleasure to meet you and also discuss gaming, which we're big fans of.
Yeah, I'm sure off camera there's going to be a lot more of this going on.
Yeah, I'll be in your offices for a little while still. So. Yeah.
Sounds good.
David, where can we find out a little bit more about you guys? Tell us a little bit more, your website.
Right now our website is CryptoFights.io. And there's not a whole lot of news on there right now, but you can sign up for our mailing list. And then it gives some oversight. Well, it basically tracks where we're at with CryptoFights. That will get updated as we make progress.
Fantastic. What we'll do, we'll ping everything at the bottom of the video description. As always, this is going to be on YouTube, Spotify. And thank you very much, David, for coming on, coming and seeing us.
Thank you, David.